Is there a group who wants to raise a question? Please, go ahead.
We have heard the use of the word awareness quite a lot today, and that is a key challenge because there's lots of really high quality work being done by lots of different stakeholders. Yes. But the key thing is it won't be anywhere near as effective as it can be if athletes and their families and coaches and teachers are not aware of dual careers as a concept and the opportunities that are there. So how collectively across the member states do we raise awareness of dual careers?
I'll take two other questions first before we start. Yes?
Hello. I'm gonna somehow challenge some of the terms you use on the documents and the way you speak, because we are speaking about dual careers, and that's all about combining education and sport. And you are speaking about talented athletes, and I've heard many times to speak about athletes at the age of 13 or 14 or 15. I think they have to be called kids, not athletes. They're not athletes at that age. They can be a prospect of athlete, but not an athlete. So calling them athletes at that age probably is hindering to balance both thanks to sport and the education. But the real mistake, in my opinion, is to call them talented. Because what is talented? If you call someone talented, you are taking for granted that he's going to succeed, which is not the case most of the times. And if you call them talented, to the parents and the kids, they think that they have to succeed. So I would suggest to change talented by committed with sport, because it's not the same thing to be a talented swimmer in Cyprus than in France or Italy or the UK. But we can agree about who is to be, what is to be committed with the sport at the age of 12 or 13 or 14.
Thank you. And the last question?
I try. We had a nice conversation with each other. It's because of Paul. Yeah. We had a discussion about competences. I think I agree with Paul. It's about competences. Sporters need to do a dual career. But then you have to start very early to that the sporters has the competences in the mind and that they can do it. Then you have to start very early. And can you expect from children from 12, 13 years old to be aware that it's very important to start with competence training? And can you expect from then on 12 years old that they have the skills, that they learn the skills and that they have the skills on that age? Can you expect that? Because they are children and that's it. Yeah.
The first question, I'll stop with those three. The first question, who wants to take the floor on the awareness raising on the European level?
Yes, I'll answer your question because we actually had a big discussion during our last seminar on how to raise awareness and what tool can be used. And we had a pretty good idea from our colleagues from the Cricketers in England Association, because they decided not to go to the athletes directly anymore, but bringing their wives over. Because sometimes the factor that will change the mindset of the athletes was his wife or partner. So they've decided to get to their wives, get them together and say, hey, by the way, we are the Player Association and we have a big, one of the greatest programs to help your husband to transition. And then when he comes at night, he got his wife, knocking on his ear and saying, well, there is a program for you. So I think it's kind of, it's a way to do it. I think it has to be done collectively. It has to be done by everybody. There is around the world in New Zealand, in rugby, a great program. And you saw what happened with the New Zealand rugby really recently. They won the World Cup. But if you look back at 8 years from now, they were struggling hardly. They barely passed the first round of the World Cup twice, and they had pretty bad results. So they gathered all the stakeholders together, the federation, the clubs, the player union, and all together they decided that they needed to do something to change the mindset of the player. So they have installed a player development manager in every team They are financed partially by the clubs, partially by the leagues, the federation, and run by the union. And all the players have entered into this program where they have to comply and they have to follow up. And they have resources. They have guys who are staying on the club 3 or 4 days a week, so they can refer to. They go back to school. And it's also the acceptance from the coaches that allows those athletes to actually do something.
But Jean-François, I think what you said applies as well for husbands, but maybe even more if you are talking about the talented players for the parents.
Exactly.
Because the parents, it's not mentioned that much today, and I think there are some parents here. You are part of this dual career system, and maybe Laurent, maybe that's something for you to say about.
Yes, absolutely. I think the parents are very important, but it's not just the parents. I think, while an athlete's career is not possible without the parents, that's for sure. But I think one big problem of the awareness today is that you have the people, your coaches or the people in sport who are very aware of where can you go to succeed in the sport. And then you have the people in school, your teachers, your headmasters. They are very aware of where you can go to succeed in your school, but there's no system in place that actually combines the two. And I think, yeah, if you make the parents aware, they are able to go look for that. I think in my case that was definitely the case. They supported me a lot, and they found the university I could go to. But I think in terms of awareness, there needs to be a system put in place that combines sports and school, that is aware of where you can combine the two and not just the one or the other.
There was the question on the talented, the definition of talents. To avoid a semantical discussion, maybe we should give some clarity about it from our panel. But I think if, who wants to take the floor on this?
Yeah.
Paul?
I think, let's go for it. I think you have a wrong concept of talent, my friend. There's nothing wrong with talent. There's something wrong with people saying then, because you're talented, we expect this. Or do not educate the young child or youngster what talent means. Talent is an abstract object. It could be talent to make friends. It could be talent and so on. So the competency to develop your own skills could be seen as talent and is not negative. It's the context in which it's placed and the people expecting then what you do with that talent make it sometimes a more negative emphasis. So in that sense, I do not mind talking about talents. The question is a talent somebody who is specialized in one thing or somebody who is average or more than average in more things? Let's take decathlon, for example. Who's the athlete? Who's the talented youngster? Those who go into decathlon, 10 different events, for example, or the one who specializes in long jump, for example. So talent in that sense is an abstract object, but I think we need to learn our young children what it means, talent development.
Thank you, and I think it's also very practical and pragmatic to say that some of the governments and some of the Olympic committees and sports federations are using this terminology to even to recognize certain groups of players which get additional attention for preparing more trainings than others. So we could always discuss the terminology, but I think it's also quite common in different countries that we are using this terminology even from the perspective of defining groups which you can support more than this. Paul, there was another question to you about the competences, but because before you want to, I give you the floor, I want to like to ask you, Jean-Louis, you said, I think in the break, you could talk about competences, but why not taking a teacher in your sport delegation to the events? Can you explain a little bit more?
I mentioned a line I read in the newspaper in Luxembourg. It's about under-19 football team. They went to Cyprus to play a week-long tournament, and it was mentioned that on the team they did not only have coaches but also a teacher. It was last week only, so I was not able to check what kind of a teacher, was it from Sport Lycée? Probably not, because they have their own structures. But in my eyes, it's an important sign for parents, for athletes, for everyone about the concept of dual career. And that brings me to the point that there is still a big lack of information about what we mean with dual career, what is in place with dual career, and what we still have to fit together. Young athletes, of course, have dreams. We have to support them and to guide them through the pitfalls. And so that's a big challenge. But at the beginning, there is a dream, and this is good. Call it talent or...
But it's about also the competences of the coaches, it's the competences of the athletes. Paul, maybe a short answer to the group who discussed about that.
Okay, let's give it a concrete example. In the Netherlands, the Dutch Olympic Committee states it's 8 years before the podium. So there's an expectancy. But there's also a very defined line on which the period is that sports will invest in the high potential, talented or whatsoever athlete. So it means that you have a window of 8 years, but depending on the sport, that could be in female gymnastics from the age of 6, 7, 8, or a rowing, male rowing from the age of 18, 19, and so on. But the window is the same. It's the way in which we will try to develop your skills in order to be able to reach a certain level. Now, if you have this as a period, you could say, well, competency development, and competencies, what do I mean with this, in order to be sure that you understand me well? It's not only skills, but it's also knowledge, experience, and attitude. 4 elements. Well, actually, those 4 elements can be introduced in an educational pathway. And that's where the Netherlands are now looking for. What kind of skills, competencies do our athletes need to develop their own skill level? On a holistic point, once again, I go back to what Tuli has said and also Wolfgang. It's not only about athletic skills, it's about relationship skills, it's about academic skills, and so on. So in essence, what we are now saying in the Netherlands is your development as an athlete is actually an educational process. And you can learn them those skills, knowledge, but you have to have coaches who are educated to do so and a system that supports that. So in essence, the idea is very simple, but you have to have an organizational structure and a financial means to support that development. But in essence, and I'll try to round up, if we turn it around, and that's what research has shown, that those Olympic international athletes, let's say this is the standard we're looking at, are able to show those competencies, setting skills, goals, succeeding at, and so on and so on. So there's a process where they have learned this, okay? So why would we not be able to educate this rather than expect that they just learn it by chance almost?
Thank you very much. I think it's a nice bridge to the second block. Because like you are saying, 8 years maybe you need, or maybe longer or shorter, to go for your podium or for your Olympic Games or for your national team in the World or European Championships. Then, when you are on that level, the real elite athletes, and you are an example, Laurent, you were an example, some of you were all examples. What are you facing then in this dual career perspective? How the different careers, this time management, all these different obligations, what are the issues you want to raise on this topic, on the service of the dual career services, or what are the issues we have to improve in the future to make life a bit better or maybe better balanced for the elite